Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
Episode 70, Lola Montez, Part 2. If you haven't already, please go back to Part 1 of this episode to have an understanding of Lola Montez's life and adventures before arriving on Australian shores. This episode is covering her time in Australia as a performer and also when she returned to America. So Montez commenced a performance tour, taking her spider dance on the road, and she arrived on the 16th of August 1855 in Sydney, Australia, on the ship the Fanny Major from San Francisco with her own theatrical company. It says that she was followed to Australia by her faithful lover, Major Folland, who left his wife and children in Texas to follow her. And on the 22nd of August 1855, the Fanny Major arrived on Thursday evening from San Francisco, having left their port on the 6th of June. The Fanny Major encountered heavy weather during the first part of the voyage, in which the mainmast head was badly sprung. Madame Lola Montez, together with several other theatrical performers, have arrived here by the vessel. Lola had played at the Victoria Theatre in Sydney in August 1855, and the daring of her dances shocked the morals of the Sydney siders. 24th of August 1855 in Sydney. The talk of the day is the debut of Lola Montez, but as little has yet been said in public papers about it, I may as well offer my opinion upon the subject. Her first appearance was on Thursday last, when she was met with a crowded house. Her reception was pronounced as a good one. Various opinions as to the merits of the play and the actress were afloat the following day. But in the better informed and more educated circles, there seemed to be a very general impression of contempt for both. On the second evening last night, there was not a single female in the parquet, and but one box in the dress circle in which a female appeared. The pit was 3 parts filled, and the rest of the house thinly attended. Perhaps under these circumstances I saw her to disadvantage, but I am compelled to say that I differ entirely from those who think that Lola has any talent. Her appearance is good, her voice is, if not bad, deficient altogether in flexibility and sweetness, at least when raised to the pitch calculated for the stage. She is sometimes graceful for a moment or two, but coarseness and vulgarity is sure to follow hard upon such glimpses of a better spirit. Her grand effect is as a posturess. The manner in which she can conceal the exquisite proportions of her figure, and even to some extent deform them and then suddenly reveal them in a burst of passion or an attempt at tenderness in all their magnificence, is doubtless a study for an artist. She dresses her parts well, rather showily but in taste, and takes very good care that no part of her beautiful figure shall be exhibited more than necessary. From one solitary glance of her foot during the whole place, I should say that it must have been some strong effort of female resolutions which could induce her to keep it so studiously concealed. Her features are interesting, but not regularly beautiful, and to my taste, not pleasantly expressive. The piece she played in, purporting to be a description of her life and adventures in Bavaria, is about the greatest piece of trash and humbug ever introduced before an English audience. There is no decency in the acting, but the whole tenor of it, socially, politically and religiously, is profligate and immoral in the extreme. Lola Montez, if I mistake not, will find her visit to Sydney turns out a failure. On the 13th of September 1855, Madame Lola Montez performed a very interesting comedy entitled The Follies of a Night, afterwards appearing in a dance called the Spider Dance, which was well received in New York. I must say, however, much one may admire a clever danse, that there are some parties of it, the propriety of which may certainly be questioned, and if public reports are correct, a repetition of the kind would soon be stopped by orders from headquarters. So Lola, used to dictating terms to monarchs and ministers, it wasn't long before there was dissension in her company, and she promptly dismissed them. And it says the discharged members of her company sued her in the Supreme Court and obtained heavy damages. Lola entirely disregarded the proceedings. She went aboard the steamer Waratah about to leave for Melbourne. The successful litigant's solicitors hurriedly procured a writ to prevent her from departing. The sequel was amusing. The bailiff charged with the service reaching the steamer just as she was casting off, and it was not until the vessel was underway that he succeeded in finding his quarry. She was in her bunk, entirely disrobed, and coolly told him he could take her. The unfortunate man rushed on deck and endeavoured to signal the water police, but he was promptly prevented by some of the crew. At the heads, the perplexed bailiff was landed, and the Waratah with the triumphant actress headed south. The dinner on board that night must have been a merry one, enlivened as it would have been with the hearty laughter caused by the bailiff's quandary. The captain and some of the crew were evidently parties to the escape, and they were threatened with proceedings, but nothing seems to have been done. So on the 22nd of August 1855 in Melbourne papers, arrival of Lola Montez. Captain Gilmore of the Wonga Wonga arrived from Sydney yesterday and informed our shipping reporter that Lola Montez had arrived in Melbourne under the name of Madame Lansfeld Heald. So Captain Gilmore was giving Melbourne the heads up that she was arriving, and on the 10th of September 1855, Lola Montez and her troop are expected from Sydney by the Waratah on Monday next. And on the 12th of September, Lola Montez, this celebrated lady with her company, arrived on the Waratah steamer from Sydney yesterday afternoon at 4:30 and was conducted by Mr. Hams, the representative of the Grand Imperial Hotel in Elizabeth Street, to that establishment where she purposes remaining during her stay in Melbourne. She will appear at the Theatre Royal on Thursday evening. And there was a little side note, smoking not allowed in the cabin. This excellent rule was departed from on board the Waratah on her last passage from Sydney, Lola Montez having stipulated that this privilege should be acceded to her unconditionally. So news had travelled fast to Melbourne and ahead of Lola's arrival, as in Melbourne news of her escapades up in Sydney had been circulating, and on her first appearance at the Theatre Royal it was crowded. The ad for her first appearance on the 3rd of September 1855, Theatre Royal, Bourke Street. The manager has great pleasure in announcing he has succeeded in effecting an engagement with the world-renowned artiste, Lola Montez, and her transatlantic company of comedians, who will have the honour of making their first appearance in the course of the ensuing week. There are also some reminiscences of her stay at her rooms at the Imperial Hotel. It says Lola's informal receptions were exceedingly well patronised. Staid businessmen visited her out of mere curiosity, curious to see the woman who had very nearly caused a revolution in Bavaria. The general hangers-on to anything exciting were there, of course, and the frequenters of the theatres examined in daylight, and with naked eye, the charms which charmed, or were deemed to have done so, at night. On the 14th of September 1855, Lola Montez has been the first to repeat upon the stage the historical actions in which she has sustained a part upon the actual stage of daily life. We do not quarrel with her version of those Bavarian incidents which culminated in the affair of March 1848. Lola is a lady, and therefore her veracity is unimpeachable. All we complain of is that the drama entitled Lola Montez in Bavaria is utterly destitute of either plot, incident or situation, that the dialogue is made up of stilted and claptrap appeals, of stale witticisms and exploded jokes. The jokes indeed were so bad that the audience last night laughed at them contemptuously. The claptrap was so palpable that most democratic individuals presented sniggers derisively. The play was a prolonged mystery, yet no mystery in the medieval sense of the word, for it had no moral significance. Of sentiment there was a rank abundance. All kings were miscreants, all counts and barons silly good-natured fools, all prime ministers fops and fribbles. There were 5 acts corresponding to many areas of the actress's Bavarian career, and at the close of each, 2,000 people were expecting the arrival of a climax which never came. It was a constant repetition. 2,000 came to be amused, and they were amused at their own fooling in having come. So they laughed at themselves and at each other. They fired off a little jocular artillery at the Jesuits in white trousers and masking dominoes, who were somehow or other implicated in the drama, and were immensely merry at the revolution which occurred outside and inside of some mansion somewhere in Europe. There was a great ringing of bells and a gigantic rattle. Startled women rushed across the stage, darted back again behind the scenes, ready to repeat the rush. 20 footmen or soldiers, we couldn't make out which, struggled with 20 men in glazed blouses for the possession of 20 muskets. A great consumption of red fire, an agitating apparition of a lady in white. It all left the audience in a state of great perplexity. They were perplexed to know what it was all about. A silent withdrawal from the house, the indulgence in a little sibilation or peal of laughter. The impulse to laughter was the strongest. It was the laughter of good humour, directed by a feeling of kindly respect for a lady, and it branched out into applause. Our contemporary is quite competent to defend herself, and we hope that the gentleman in the pit stalls, whose irrepressible risibility excited such an indignant reproach, will not receive an invitation this morning to pistols and coffee for two. We have neither inclination nor space to add a few words of seriousness to this article, though the subject might furnish a text for either an essay or a homily, would supply materials for a farce and suggest matter for a satire. So in Melbourne, she was denounced from the pulpit as a daughter of sin, and letters in the press demanded that the police should suppress the scandalous exhibition. On the 25th of September, so a little over a week later, Lola Montez. The following remarks appear in the Argus of Thursday last. Why the stage of the Theatre Royal should have been selected for public exhibition of the kind which took place last evening, we cannot imagine. Although far from admiring the entertainment with which the public of this city for the last week have nightly treated, at which we once hoped to call our National Theatre, we have hitherto obtained from commenting upon them. But after the exhibition of last evening, it would be criminal on our part to continue to be silent, which such a course of conduct might be construed into a merely negative objection to such scenes as presented by Madame Lola Montez. We feel called upon to denounce, in terms of unmeasured reprobation, the performances in which that lady last evening figured. We do not intend to enter into details. The crowded attendants at the theatre will understand our motive for not doing so. Our conclusion, however, is that we arrive at this. If the management of the Theatre Royal aim at securing public patronage by such performances, they have no right to insult respectable ladies by inviting their attendance. And if scenes of the kind are ever to be repeated, we consider that the interference of authorities is imperatively called for to put down as a nuisance and as utterly subversive of all ideas of public morality. Well, Lola responded. Lola Montez and the Spider Dance, to the editor of the Herald. Sir, I notice of my performance of the Spider Dance at the Theatre Royal that last evening appeared in this morning's edition of the Argus, couched in such language as to render it's imperative on me to reply to it. The piety and ultra-puritanism of the Argus might possibly operate to prevent the insertion of a letter in their column bearing my signature, and therefore I address myself to you, relying on your sense of justice, to publish this communication, in fairness to myself and the public. The dance in question is essentially a national one, and is witnessed with delight in Spain by all classes and both sexes, from the Queen to the peasant. I am not the inventor or the originator of the dance in question, but simply the delineateur of a great national spectacle. I do not perform the dance to minister any morbid taste for immoral representations. I have always looked upon it as a work of high art, and on artistic grounds alone I appear before the Melbourne public, as I have appeared in the same character before the most distinguished audiences in the world. And I throw back with scorn the imagination of the Argus that I am in this dance come forward to pander to a morbid taste for indelicate representations. Theirs is the indelicacy who look at any work of art with a rare penance in their minds. Let them remember that the symbol of innocence in the statue of Eve, and since the days when Eve surveyed herself in the fountain, works of art, however portrayed, have by their very character been enacted by ribaldry of the licentious or initiated. I shall be at my post tomorrow night, and shall there take a course which will test the value of the opinion advanced in the paragraph of the Argus above alluded to. Lola Montez at the Grand Imperial Hotel. Her notorious Spider Dance has been recreated at the Ballarat Sovereign Hill Outdoor Museum, and on their site you can see a reenactment and also a number of clips that outline Lola's effect that it had in the Ballarat Goldfields. Her appearance at the Victoria Theatre in the Main Road, Ballarat, on the 16th of February 1854 caused a tremendous sensation. At that time, Ballarat was at its zenith of its gold-producing centre, and in 1 year, more than $2 million worth of gold was uncovered from the shallow diggings at Ballarat. Henry Seacamp, the editor of the Ballarat Times, attacked Lola in his paper for her Spider Dance. He said it was indecent and shameful. Hot-tempered lovely Lola was not going to stand such criticism. She armed herself with a strong dog whip and watched for Mr. Seacamp to go into the United States Hotel for his morning refreshment. She followed him into the bar and showered heavy blows across his back and shoulders. But Seacamp had come prepared. He'd brought a horsewhip with him, and when the pretty little Spitfire whacked him, he retaliated. There was not too much for the gallants in the barroom. Pistols were drawn to defend the charming danseuse, and but for the arrival of the police, there might have been bloodshed. The Melbourne Punch came out with a ballad on the affray. Eric Seacamp's face bore bloody trace of Lola Montez's lash. Her shoulders fair, if they were bare, would show a crimson gash. Ah me, it was a grief to see so pitiful a sight. Like lions woed, they laid in load and made a cruel fight. They fought until they both did smoke and glow like furnace red. I wit the Eric and Lola too for breath were sore bested. They flung their whips aside anon and tore each other's hair, against which the crowd raised protest loud and swore it wasn't fair. When Lola shows her fiery temper, we know that this has previously occurred where she had horsewhipped a person previously. But Lola's belligerence did not end with the horsewhipping of Mr. Seacamp. The lady had a suspicion that the manager of the theatre, Mr. Crosby, was not acting honestly towards her and spoke disparagingly of him, whereupon the manager's wife, a very capable actress Mrs. Crosby was, her husband being present, began striking Lola with a heavy whip, and this was broken in the struggle. Mrs. Crosby seized Lola Montez by the hair and beat her severely about the head and neck, disabling her from performing that evening. When Crosby read the medical certificate to the audience from the stage, he had the bad taste to lead his wife forward as the whipperess of whippers and got loudly hissed for his pains. When the news of these encounters spread amongst the diggers, Lola became more popular than ever. The Victoria Theatre was crowded every night and her spider dance was hailed with deafening applause. Every night the stage was strewn with small nuggets tossed up by her admirers, and when a new grand theatre was built at the corner of Eureka Street, it was named the Montezuma in honour of the digger's darling. So instead of bouquets, Lola had nuggets of gold thrown on stage, so what a sight that would have been. On the 4th of October 1855, an article outlining the illness of Donna Lola Montez, so slightly adjusting her name there. Owing to severe indisposition, this talented actress is unable to appear before a Geelong audience. When competent to perform, Madame Montez will complete her engagement. Her reappearance will be duly notified. Madame is suffering from a severe cold and bronchitis induced by exposure to the thunderstorm on Saturday last. And her Geelong appearance says Theatre Royal, continued success and immense attraction on Monday night, 15th of October 1855, an entire new dance never before done in the colony will be performed by Madame Lola Montez. And it says it has fallen to a lot of few actors or actresses to perform on the stage to the close and appropriate accompaniment of real thunder and lightning, but such was the experience of Lola Montez at the Criterion Theatre, Bendigo, on the 1st of April 1856, when she was appearing before a large audience, consisting mostly of diggers. During a heavy storm, lightning struck the theatre while Lola Montez was performing in Asmodeus or the Little Devil. Lightning struck the north side of the Criterion Theatre at the stage end and made a breach of nearly 3 foot in the diameter near the eaves and passed through the roof at the opposite side of the building. No one was seriously hurt, according to the Bendigo Advertiser, but 2 or 3 persons in the audience were struck by flying splinters of wood. The gauze scenery caught fire, women screamed, and everybody became frightened with the exception of Lola Montez. Amid the greatest confusion, Lola approached the footlights and said, "I hope you ladies and gentlemen will not be afraid. I'm not. The little devil is used to powder and ball. This is, however, the first time I have played the little devil with real thunder and lightning accompaniments. Previously I've had to put up with theatrical lightning, but it would appear that Bendigo folk would not be satisfied with me stage effects. They must have the genuine stuff. However, no harm has been done. As you will see, the lightning came through here," and she pointed to the breach in the wall, "but the pieces of wood had the gallantry to fall at my feet. You can go home and say you have seen the little devil with genuine thunder and lightning." At Castlemaine, Victoria in April 1856, she was rapturously encored after her spider dance in front of 400 diggers, including members of the Municipal Council who had adjourned their meeting early to attend the performance. But she did draw the wrath of the audience by insulting them, following some mild heckling. says the large building was occupied last night by 400 persons who were attracted to witness the debut in Castlemaine of the world-renowned Lola Montez. Sometime before the performances commenced, every seat was filled, and Lola, on her appearance, was greeted with a cordial welcome. She said she was as rich as any of them. She was worth £70,000 and did not care a pin for anyone. Another scene ensued, during which Lola Montez complained of the ill-natured treatment she experienced, which was met with cries of, "It's only 1 or 2 and we've paid you 10 shillings. This seemed to add fresh fuel to Lola's fire. She did not care, she said, for their 10 shillings, and she insinuated that she conferred an honour, rather than received any distinction, by dancing before them at all. We regret to say so much that what was in all other respects a successful theatrical performance, which had all been in good humour, was spoiled by the bad taste of the fair performer, who evidently, mistaken in supposing that, however she may excel in acting, she is destined to produce any favourable effect in lecturing, or rather scolding her audience for such a trivial offence. Stars of greater magnitude than herself have had to endure real indignities in their career, and in a spirit of real admiration for the talent she undoubtedly possesses, we advise her to try to imitate meekness. And another article that outlined it in a little more detail, Lola indignantly condemned a hisser. She said she had 5 million lives in her hands in Bavaria. It was because she had not sacrificed them that she was dancing there that evening. She did not come there to be judged. She was judged long ago at Her Majesty's Theatre in 1842. She was the maker of her own fortune, and she would recommend the man who had hissed her to go to school and learn not to hiss when he did not understand. So after this event, she starred for a while at Heffernan and Crowley's Shamrock Theatre in Bendigo. Whilst here, she and Billy Heffernan had a fallout, and Billy used to relate how he simply took the whip from her and made her behave herself. So after all of that excitement, in 1856, in the August, she sailed to France from Melbourne. There was a tragic incident associated with her departure from Australia. The leading man of her company, the handsome young fellow named Folland, jumped overboard and drowned himself on the passage from Sydney. Rumour had it that poor Folland, undeterred by the fact that Lola already had 3 husbands, wanted to permanently link his fate with hers, and in a fit of jealousy had come to the conclusion that his life was not worth living. So, as mentioned earlier, he had a wife and 2 children back in America. She then sailed to America in 1857, making her appearance at the Green Street Theatre in New York with one performance titled Lola in Bavaria. She was now 40, and the years were beginning to tell. She next appeared in America as a public lecturer, speaking of beautiful women, gallantry, and heroines of history. These lectures were printed in America and England in 1858, and there was also a German edition published in 1864. She also published The Art of Beauty in New York in 1858, of which there's a French edition. The lectures were written for her by Reverend C. Chauncey and were financially successful. She'd also made a fortune in Ballarat, but she spent very freely and the money did not last. In 1859, she was reacquainted with a school friend from Montrose, Mrs. Buchanan in New York, and this meant altering her focus in life. She visited women who were seen as social outcasts, living at the Magdalen Asylum near New York. Lola was living in a boarding house, penniless at this time. She had met her protégé, the daughter of her old agent, who had married the naval officer. In her usual impulsive way, Lola rushed up to embrace the young woman, and the young woman repulsed her with, "Madam, I do not know you." She responded with, "Not know me? Why, my child, I am Lola." "Madam," repeated the girl, who owed her all to Lola's charity, said, "I do not know you. I never spoke to you before, and if you persist in annoying me, I will call a policeman." This ingratitude was too much. Lola fell to the ground in a fainting fit. She was carried home and it was found that one side of her body was paralysed. So she'd suffered a stroke, and in the mid-December she recovered enough to walk with a slight limp and went out for a stroll in the cold weather. And there was a reverend that visited her, Reverend Dr. Hawkes, January of 1861, and he said, "In the city of New York I called upon her a few days before she died. She had lived at a palace at Munich and become the occupant of an upstairs back room in a small house. Consumption had reft her face of its beauty, while it added to the brilliancy of her wondrous eyes. Her couch was a humble one, and around her room were scriptural texts written in large, legible characters. It is to be hoped that as her feverish burning eyes gazed upon them, the heart of the contrite woman derived consolation. She had the book open onto a story of Mary Magdalene. When she found that she was dying, she bought a grave for herself in the Greenwood Cemetery, where her body was placed to rest, and on her coffin was placed a modest plate that read, Mrs. Eliza Gilbert died 27th of January 1861, aged 42. She left all her money, which was only $300, to the Home for Fallen Women in New York. In the end, her cause of death was pneumonia. However, some accounts say that she had contracted syphilis, and this contributed to her mental state of mind and her health towards the end as well. She was self-made, creative and charismatic. She mixed with notable figures of her day. She grew up an agile, good-looking creature full of generous impulses, quick-witted, but hot-tempered and willful. These latter qualities added to an unchecked and predominant vanity and brought about all her shortcomings and breaches of social rectitude. Lola Montez has a lake named after her in the Tahoe National Forest in Nevada County, California, and there's also a mountain named in her honour, Mount Lola. It is the highest point in the Nevada County in California. In March 1939, there was an article titled A King's Romance Recalled. Lot 111 in Christie's auction sale of jewels recently was a footnote to romantic history of nearly a century ago. It is 1847 in Munich, capital of the independent South German Kingdom of Bavaria. Lola Montez, that was born 29 years before in Ireland, was there known as Maria Dolores Eliza Rosanna Gilbert. King Ludwig I sees her dance and is infatuated with her and gives her a 4-foot triple necklace of 249 pearls and created her Countess Lansfeld. Bidding jumps at £20 at a time and then slows down and halts at £840. The spectators gasp, for the necklace looks more magnificent than the others, which would have sold for tens of thousands. One of the experts speaks, inferior pearls, not of very high quality, he says. Throughout my research, there were mentions of children that Lola had. However, none of those children I could cross-reference to validate, in fact, that she bore children. There were rumours of a daughter that she had with the king. There was also rumours of a daughter that she may have had around the time of her marriage to Captain James, although that couldn't be verified. And then there was also reference to 2 sons that didn't survive infancy that were rumoured that she had with her husband, Captain Heald. So I haven't included that full information or the rumours and the articles alluding to children due to the lack of evidence. So I hope you enjoyed the very interesting life of Lola Montez.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.